Imagine it is 1720. You are a merchant sailor somewhere in the Caribbean. The sky is pale blue, the wind is behind you, and the cargo hold beneath your feet is packed with sugar, tobacco, and silver. It is, by every measure, a good day at sea. Then someone on the bow screams a single word. Sail. You raise your glass. A ship. Small, dark, and impossibly fast, cutting the waves at an angle no merchant vessel ever could. It is gaining. Within 20 minutes, it is close enough to see the men lining the rails, close enough to count the cannon ports running down its hull, and close enough to watch what happens next. A black cloth rises to the masthead and catches the wind. On it, a grinning white skull. 2 crossed bones beneath it. Your blood goes cold, not because you are about to be boarded, not because you might be killed, but because in that single moment, looking at that flag, you understand with absolute clarity that the world you knew 10 minutes ago no longer exists. The flag is not a warning. It is a verdict. That piece of black cloth, the Jolly Roger, was the most psychologically devastating weapon ever deployed on the open ocean. It cost almost nothing to make. It required no gunpowder, no cannon crew, no training, but it paralyzed the most powerful empires on Earth more completely than any broadside ever fired. Today we are going beyond the myths, beyond the Hollywood swords and the rum-soaked legends. We are uncovering exactly how the Jolly Roger was engineered, why it worked with terrifying precision, and how one piece of fabric rewrote the rules of naval warfare, international law, and the psychology of power forever. Before the skull and crossbones existed, pirates had no signature. They were anonymous. They flew whatever colors suited them at the moment. French flags, English flags, Spanish flags, the colors of whoever they were pretending to be. This was called sailing under false colors, and it was devastatingly effective. A pirate ship flying an English merchant flag could pull alongside a target before anyone suspected a thing. But something changed in the early 1700s. The golden age of piracy was in full swing. Pirates were no longer scattered, isolated criminals operating in the shadows. They were organized. They had codes. They had republics. They had captains whose names spread through every port in the Atlantic like a contagion, and they needed people to know who was coming. The first pirate flags were red. Not black, red. Solid crimson, sometimes called the Jolie Rouge by French sailors. The pretty red. And the message it carried was absolutely clear. No quarter. No mercy. No survivors. If a ship saw the red flag and chose to fight, the pirates intended to leave no one alive to tell the story. The shift to black was one of the most calculated rebranding decisions in the history of psychological warfare. Black meant death, yes, but it meant something more specific than red. Black was an offer. Red was a sentence. When a pirate ran up the black flag, what they were actually saying was this: surrender now, and you might live. The red flag came out only when that offer had been refused. Most merchant captains grasped this distinction instantly. The black flag gave them a choice. The red flag told them it was already too late. But here is what most people miss about the Jolly Roger. It was never a single flag. It was a system of personal brands, each one as deliberately designed as any corporate logo in the modern world. Edward Teach, Blackbeard, flew a flag showing a horned skeleton, stabbing a bleeding heart with a spear, while raising a toast to death. Every element of that image was chosen to communicate something specific. The toast suggested Blackbeard's crew welcomed death. The spear through the heart was a promise of what awaited anyone who resisted. The skeleton was not generic death. It was Blackbeard himself, already dead, already beyond fear, already beyond consequence. Bartholomew Roberts flew 2 flags. On one, a pirate stood on 2 skulls labeled ABH and AMH, a Barbadian's head and a Martinican's head, a direct response to governors from those islands who had issued warrants for his arrest. Roberts was not just flying a flag. He was sending a specific political message to specific men by name. Calico Jack Rackham's flag showed a skull above 2 crossed cutlasses. Simple, clean, and immediately recognizable from a quarter-mile away. Jack understood something that most historians underestimate. In an era without photographs, without newspapers, without any mass communication system, the flag was your identity. It traveled ahead of you. Sailors who had never seen your ship still knew your flag, because survivors talked, merchants talked, port taverns talked. The stories that spread were not neutral. They were amplified by terror into something much larger than any single ship or crew could ever be in reality. This was the first true mass propaganda campaign in maritime history. The Jolly Roger was not just a flag. It was a brand, a reputation management strategy, and a psychological weapon, all stitched onto 6 square feet of black fabric. To understand why the Jolly Roger changed history, you have to understand what a pirate actually wanted. And this is where most people get it completely wrong. Pirates did not want battles. Battles were expensive. Battles killed your own crew, destroyed your own rigging, and put holes in the very cargo ship you were trying to capture intact. Every pirate captain with half a brain wanted exactly one thing: the unconditional surrender of the target vessel before a single shot was fired. The cannon, which we have covered extensively in previous episodes, was a critical tool. But the cannon had one massive limitation: it announced your presence. The moment you fired, the encounter became unpredictable. Stray shots could sink the prize. Merchant crews could fight back harder than expected. Royal Navy warships within earshot could come to investigate. The Jolly Roger solved all of that. It was a cannon that never missed. It fired fear instead of iron, and fear was infinitely more effective. Consider the mathematics of a typical pirate encounter. A merchant ship might carry 10 or 12 guns, crewed by sailors who had never fired a weapon in anger. The merchant captain knew his cargo was insured, or could be replaced. He knew that fighting back meant his crew would die. He knew the pirate code: surrender peacefully and live, resist and face consequences that no insurance policy could cover. And he could read that code simply by looking at the flag. Historians estimate that as many as 3 out of every 4 pirate captures during the Golden Age happened without a shot fired in either direction. 3 out of 4. The ships were taken by a piece of cloth, by a reputation, by the weight of every terrifying story that had traveled through every port ahead of that ship. This is what made the Jolly Roger genuinely revolutionary. It turned piracy from a military problem into a psychological one. And psychological problems are far harder to solve than military ones because you cannot sink a reputation with a cannonball. The pirates who understood this best were not the most violent. They were the most theatrical. Blackbeard was a genius of personal terror. He would braid slow-burning fuses into his thick black beard before a battle, so that as he stood on the deck, his face was literally wreathed in smoke and fire. He looked like a demon climbing out of hell. Surrender rates for ships that encountered Blackbeard were almost total, not because of his cannons, though he had many, because of the image, the flag, the smoke, the character he had constructed so carefully and maintained so consistently. What Blackbeard understood, and what the British Empire eventually had to confront, was that the Jolly Roger had turned the open ocean into a theater of psychological warfare. And pirates were winning every single performance. If this deep dive into the darker corners of maritime history is hitting different, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join the crew here at Void Bilge. Every week, we pull back the curtain on the legends and the grit of the high seas. Drop a comment below right now. If you were a pirate captain sailing the Caribbean in 1718, what symbol would you put on your flag? I read every single comment. Now, back to the flag that forced the most powerful navy on Earth to change everything. The British Empire did not panic immediately. Empires rarely do. For the first decade of the Golden Age, the attitude in London was closer to irritated tolerance than genuine alarm. Pirates were a nuisance, a cost of doing business at sea. The Navy would handle them eventually. But the Jolly Roger changed the calculation, because the flag did something that individual pirate attacks never could. It unified the threat. It gave piracy a face. It suggested organization, coordination, and permanence. And when one flag could represent dozens of different captains operating across 3 oceans simultaneously, it stopped looking like a criminal problem and started looking like a political one. Nassau in the Bahamas had become what contemporaries called the Pirate Republic. At its peak, over 1,000 pirates operated out of Nassau, protected by corrupt governors, supplied by merchants who asked no questions, and coordinated, loosely but effectively, by a shared understanding of the pirate code. The Jolly Roger was the flag of that republic, not any single captain's flag. The concept itself. London could not allow a sovereign pirate state to exist in the middle of the most profitable shipping corridor in the world. The response was unprecedented in its speed and scope. First came the legal weapon, the Act for the More Effectual Suppression of Piracy, in 1700, later strengthened in 1717. This legislation did something extraordinary. It declared pirates to be hostis humani generis, enemies of all mankind, not enemies of England, not enemies of the Crown. Enemies of every nation, every sailor, every merchant on Earth simultaneously. This single legal declaration meant that any naval vessel from any nation could arrest, try, and execute a pirate without diplomatic complications. It created the foundation of international maritime law as we know it today. One flag, the Jolly Roger, had forced the world's most powerful legal minds to invent an entirely new category of criminal. Second came the military response. The Royal Navy fundamentally restructured its operational doctrine because of piracy. Before the Golden Age, the Navy built for fleet engagements. Massive ships of the line carrying 60, 80, 100 guns, designed to fight other navies in open water. They were slow, heavy, and completely unsuited to chasing sloops through shallow Caribbean waters. The Jolly Roger forced the Navy to build what sailors called pirate catchers. Smaller frigates, faster sloops, shallow draft vessels that could follow pirates into waters where the great ships of the line could not go. The Navy that emerged from the Golden Age was more mobile, more flexible, and more tactically sophisticated than the one that entered it. A pirate flag had modernized the most powerful military force on the planet. Third came intelligence. Governor Woodes Rogers arrived in Nassau in 1718 with 3 warships, a royal pardon, and a clear message. Every pirate in the harbor could take the king's pardon and go straight, or refuse, and be hunted to the ends of the earth. Most took the pardon. The ones who refused, men like Charles Vane and Calico Jack Rackham, were given exactly the end they had been advertising on their flags. Vane was captured in 1720, tried in Port Royal, and hanged in chains. Rackham was taken the same year. His female crew members, Anne, Bonnie, and Mary Read, reportedly fought harder than any of the men when the Navy came aboard. But the intelligence operation was what truly turned the tide. Merchants who had been captured and released by pirates were systematically debriefed by naval officers. What guns did the pirate ship carry? How many crew? Where were they headed? What anchorages did they prefer? This information flowed between governors, admirals, and ship captains across the Atlantic. Pirates who thought they were operating in the shadows suddenly found warships waiting at their planned anchorages, their movements predicted before they made them. The Jolly Roger had taught the Empire something invaluable, that psychological warfare required an intelligence response, not just a military one. You could not out-intimidate a flag. You had to outthink the people flying it. The Battle of Cape Lopez in February 1722 was the clearest illustration of what happened when imperial cannon power finally caught up with pirate reputation. Bartholomew Roberts, arguably the most successful pirate in history with over 400 ships to his name, was anchored off the coast of West Africa when HMS Swallow appeared. Captain Challoner Ogle used a trick that Roberts should have anticipated. He sailed past the pirate fleet as if he had not noticed them, drawing one of Roberts's smaller vessels out in pursuit. Once separated, he turned and destroyed it. Then he came back for the main event. Roberts was killed in the opening exchange. A charge of grape shot caught him in the throat while he stood on the quarterdeck in his finest clothes. A crimson coat, a diamond cross on a gold chain, 2 pistols on a silk sling. The man who had terrorized 3 oceans died looking like exactly the theatrical character he had always played. His crew, following his standing orders, threw his body overboard before the Navy could take it as a trophy. Without their captain, the pirates fought on for 3 more hours. The noise alone was almost unbearable. 40 guns on each side, trading broadsides at close range, the concussion waves bouncing off the water, the screaming of wounded men, the crack of timber as cannonballs punched through oak hulls. Sailors who survived cannon engagements in this era often suffered permanent hearing loss. Some were knocked unconscious simply by standing too close to a gun when it fired. When it was over, 169 pirates were captured. 52 were hanged. The rest were imprisoned or sent to the gold mines of West Africa. It was the largest pirate trial in history, and it effectively ended the golden age of piracy in the Atlantic. Not a flag this time. Cannon. The golden age ended. The pirates were hanged, pardoned, or driven to the edges of the world. The shipping lanes of the Atlantic were patrolled by warships that outgunned anything pirates could field. By 1730, the Jolly Roger was an artifact, a relic of 50 years that had felt, from the inside, like a lifetime. But the flag did not die. It evolved. During the First World War, British submarines that had successfully sunk enemy vessels returned to port, flying the Jolly Roger from their conning towers. The Royal Navy, the same institution that had spent the entire 18th century hunting pirates down and hanging them, had adopted the pirate flag as a symbol of naval excellence. The logic was not complicated. The Jolly Roger meant you had been where the rules did not apply, that you had operated in the deep places where there were no witnesses, and that you had come back having done something the enemy could not stop. It meant exactly what it had always meant. We do not follow your rules. We make our own. The tradition continues. British submarine crews. British still fly the Jolly Roger on returning from successful patrols today. In the world of hacking and cybersecurity, the skull and crossbones has become the universal shorthand for operating outside sanctioned systems, for finding the vulnerabilities that authorized users cannot see, for moving through networks the way pirates moved through shipping lanes, unseen until it was too late. The metaphor is not accidental. It is conscious. Hackers know exactly what they are invoking when they use that image. In popular culture, from the Jolly Roger on children's birthday parties, to the flag on the back of motorcycles, to the skull. Imagery. Woven through fashion for 300 years, the image has become something the pirates themselves could never have predicted. Universal. It belongs to no nation, no culture, no specific political position. It belongs to the idea of the outsider, the one who operates beyond the law, not out of desperation, but out of choice. Every major flag in history represents something: a nation, a religion, a dynasty, an empire. The Jolly Roger is the only flag in human history that represents the deliberate rejection of all of those things simultaneously. It does not represent a country. It represents the decision to belong to no country. It does not represent a cause. It represents the decision that no cause is worth serving except your own. That is why it survived the deaths of every pirate who ever flew it. You can kill a man. You cannot kill a concept. The Jolly Roger was never just a warning. It was a manifesto. It told every empire, every navy, every merchant captain on the open ocean that the old rules were, out here, suggestions. That on the water, in the deep channels, between the islands and the continents, there were men who had decided to be ungovernable. And for one brief, extraordinary, violent period of 50 years, they were right. The same technology that empires used to build their wealth, the ship, the cannon, the trade route, became the weapon that outlaws used to hold those empires to ransom. And the flag above all of it, catching the wind at the masthead, doing more psychological work in a single second than 100 cannons could do in an hour, was a piece of black cloth with a grinning skull on it. Next time you see those white bones on a black field, on a poster, on a t-shirt, on the back of a jacket, remember what you are actually looking at. You are looking at the most successful propaganda tool in the history of naval warfare. A flag that turned 3 oceans into a kingdom, that forced the world's most powerful empires to rewrite their laws and redesign their navies, and that has outlived every single person who ever flew it by 300 years and counting. That is the story of the Jolly Roger. Not a costume, not a decoration. The founding document of the most improbable empire in history. Thanks for sailing with Void Bilge. Fair winds. And we'll see you in the next one.